to the Village of Essex Junction Trustees meeting for Tuesday, November 12th. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would say the clock upstairs is 7:30, so we're an hour late.
I know.
My clock.
Yeah, there's been a crowd waiting for us. So, Mr. Manager, are there any agenda additions or changes?
We have none.
Not even for the
Oh,
interviews?
I'm sorry, we do. We have two people are not available for tonight for the interviews, so we're gonna need to postpone, 5A and 5B.
Actually, 5A withdrew their application, but 5B is still interested, is just not in town because of weather.
Great. All right, so would someone like to make a motion to amend the agenda?
Dan got it, and I'll second.
Great. Any further debate on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. And so now is the point of the meeting when we go to public to be heard. So this is a point in time where if there's anybody in the public who wants to talk to something that is not on the agenda, if you could please raise your hand so I can see how many, if anybody. Okay, seeing none. We can then go on to business items. So we're not doing 5A or 5B. We will go on to 5C, interview for the Village Capital Program Review Committee with Karen Dolan. Karen, if you'd like to come on up to the table here and join us. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
So as I had mentioned before we get started, as we offer to all candidates, if you have any concerns about anything that you may say in this conversation for employment purposes or other reasons, we can have this in a private executive session, or we can have this in an open session.
No, I think open would be good. I told my kids they could watch this. They would be disappointed.
I know their time for my son live stream. Sometimes I get some feedback later on.
Yeah.
I know, it's pretty rough. So with that, if you can just start by giving us a little bit of information about you and why you're interested in the committee.
Yes. So I've been a resident here in the Junction since, I think it's 2007, so I've been a resident for a while, and I feel really invested in the community, obviously from living here that long. I'm a homeowner with my husband. We have 2 children that are in the school system. We also rent our condo that's in the Junction, so we're landlords, and I also work here in the Junction at the Community Justice Center, right down the road. And so I'm really looking for more opportunities to get involved in the community. Things have shifted in the past years where I have more capacity, and so I really want to give back in different ways that I can. And this opportunity I think is great, where it builds on some of the skills that I already have as far as working on a team, collaborating, prioritizing, but then it also helps to challenge me in a new area of capital projects. Those are kind of new to me, but I feel like I can use the skill sets that I already have to dive into that. So that's what I'm looking to do.
Great. I don't want to dominate if other trustees have questions they'd like to ask.
Karen, just a little bit, you understand what the Capital Committee does, and this is just probably more of a statement than a question, but what it does, it sort of helps us understand. We have more need than we have resources, as is typical in all government. And so it helps us, it gives us some guidance. And I just want to get a sense of how sometimes there might be some critical decisions, like someone's sidewalk gets paved, someone's street doesn't get paved, something like that. Are you comfortable making those kinds of decisions?
Yes.
Yeah.
My work at the Community Justice Center is all about handling difficult conversations and trying to address the needs of one party and another party, and how do you meet in the middle. Okay. So I feel very comfortable that I also feel like I have worked on a number of projects where there's a variety of stakeholders that have different needs, different pieces that they're looking for, and how do you kind of come to some common ground, understand the big picture.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
Other trustees? So the Capital Committee meets once a month. Is that a commitment you'll be able to?
Yes, the schedule of it looks great. I've looked at some of the past minutes and stuff and would be ready to jump in. It seems like there's been some great work. I can say I don't have necessarily expertise in the area, but I come committed, dedicated, and ready to jump in.
One other question. Karen, since you've been here a while and you're starting to think about infrastructure, as you look around, anything jump out at you, something that we really need to be fixing, or something that looks really good that doesn't need to be fixed? What are your general thoughts of the state of the village?
I don't know. I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont,
Okay.
which is a lot of dirt roads, back roads. So
Yeah.
I really feel like the roads around here are wonderful and great compared to there. So maybe I'm not the best person. So lots of gratitude for what we have.
Okay, great, thanks.
So there is one slot, and there are currently 2 candidates. So with that, if you were not appointed, are there other committees in which you may be interested in?
Yeah, I could look into it. I know this schedule for this one works really well for me. And there is that combination of, it's a little bit of a stretch for me, which I find challenging, and it makes me motivated to do the work. So I could certainly be open to talking about and learning more about the other committees. So I wouldn't want to say no, and I wouldn't want our community to lose out on opportunity if somebody ready to dive in. But I will say I was looking forward to this one.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else you want to leave us with, since I don't think we have other questions?
No, I just really excited for the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thanks.
we will likely
Would you
follow
like
up.
to say something to your child about doing homework?
No.
Thanks very much.
So Karen, just so you know, we will likely follow up, since the other candidate isn't here today. We'll probably interview that individual at the next meeting, so it may be 2 to 4 weeks or so until we make an actual decision. So if you don't hear from us, it's because we haven't made a decision.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay. And so that will bring us on to agenda item 5D, the Champlain Valley Exposition Financial Contribution Agreement.
It's probably my cue. We, the last meeting, I believe it was, had a preliminary discussion about renewal of a financial agreement with the Champlain Valley Expo. Over the years, they have entered into this agreement with us. There was one change to the agreement from the last time you saw it. Year 2 of a 2-year agreement has a 2% increase to the amount. So first year, 15,000, second year, 15,000 and 2%, which I believe is $300.
And so from a process standpoint, just noticing that on the agenda, we have the financial contribution separate from the sound indemnification agreement. So just for this purpose right now, we are focusing only on the financial contribution portion.
Also in attendance is Tim Shea and at least one of his board members.
Yeah.
I don't recognize some of the other people in the room, so. If you want, and if there are questions, Tim could come up to the mic. If not, you're welcome to have your conversation first.
Board members, do you have any questions on the proposed?
I'll ask because it was me that was kind of pushing for this initially. Is that just for the second, this is a 2-year agreement?
2-year agreement.
Okay, never mind. Just want to make sure I understood. I think I was confused by the,
With indemnification.
they're out in 2 years? When does this start? Trying to remember what I read earlier.
This agreement,
Starts January of 2020.
Yep.
Okay. All right, never mind. No, I was just confusing myself. Sorry. Pardon me. Sorry to take up the time.
no,
I don't have any questions. I appreciate I think this looks good.
Appreciate the consideration.
I don't see that there is a motion to necessarily accept this portion of the agreements.
a simple motion to accept the agreement as constructed for 2 years with the terms will work.
Okay.
I will make a motion that the trustees accept the financial contribution agreement with CVE as amended.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And so we can go to 5E, the sound indemnification agreement with Champlain Valley Expo.
So this is probably where we are going to want Tim to come up as well. We may also want Robin, who also deals with the sound monitoring. from
Like,
staff.
our sound engineer as well.
Absolutely, that'd be
Great.
great. And if you guys can introduce yourselves to the audience once the camera gets on you.
Certainly. Slide that one more.
No, why don't you stay there?
What's that?
Let him go.
I'm gonna make
Okay.
Robinson next to me.
All right. Tim Shea, Champlain Valley Exposition.
David Wexler with Vermont Air Testing Services.
Hi, Robin.
Village of Essex Junction, nice to meet everyone.
So for the people at home, the village has had a noise agreement with CVE for now several years. This is the second, I believe there's.
This is, it'd be 10 years. We've had 2 5-year agreements.
And so the village has a noise ordinance that this agreement supersedes only insofar as the music and other certain events at CVE. So, through that, there's a requirement that the sound be monitored during a concert, and if there is a violation, a duration of violation, there's a fine structure. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
And I will clarify, it's not just concerts, it's also any event that we feel sound can be produced at CVE and heard. So we have an auto show, we have our cancer walk that goes overnight. We monitor that for sound and a couple others, but the majority are concerts, as you say.
So I know personally, I really appreciate the extra information from the last meeting. I appreciate you guys coming back again, as well as the additional information going back to the creation of this agreement, which I believe this is the first time that I've seen it in my 7 or so years on the board. So I appreciate having a significant increase in background knowledge I didn't have before, so thank you. As well as the great graphic that I shared with my family about what the sound actually means. Because hearing 80 decibels, 85, 93, I don't know the difference. So having the comparison of screaming or a jet is a great reference point. But trustees, do you have specific questions about the agreement, about anything that did not get answered last time?
I don't. I'll make the same comment I made the last time, which is that I appreciate the amount of effort. Clearly, a great deal of writing and technical writing and effort went into putting all this together, so I appreciate staff and CVE doing that. And I think this spells it out. I know that we've always struggled with this, and it's a work in progress. It's always going to be, but I think we really all are doing our best to find a common ground and do what's right. I mean, you can't control all the sound that happens, and slight change in the atmosphere, wind, barometric pressure can make all the difference in the world. So I appreciate that. I know it's difficult, and I appreciate you working with us on it.
Sure.
Maybe we can have their sound person give us a little background as to what change, what you do and what they do on the stage and in these events, and then how it's monitored.
So I've been involved in this process right from the get-go, back in 2008 when Champlain Valley Expo approached me to start doing sound monitoring. When we, in that first year, we did all the monitoring and, excuse me, come up with the noise levels that were agreed upon. In the interim, Champlain Valley Expo has redirected a lot of the soundstage, especially in the grandstand events, so that the noise levels are more concentrated inside the grandstand. It used to be, years ago when we started this, it was a lot louder out on the property line due to the way the speakers at the soundstage were set up. They've now focused more of that into the grandstand, and it's reduced the noise levels significantly. And when I say significantly, I mean from a numbers standpoint, you're talking 3 decibels. Definitely it's a logarithmic scale, so 3 decibel lowering of by that much is a significant reduction in noise level. That being said, what I do as far as monitoring is I doodle on the property lines, primarily over on the east side of the property, just below the neighborhood, I believe it's Summit Street or Summit, at the base of the hill there, in front of the fence before the tree line. That is pretty much the closest you can get to that neighborhood, and within direct line of sight of the soundstage. I tend to do set up south of the Green Gate inside the Midway area more. I have done monitoring outside that area, and it tends to be quieter over there, so I do to try to get the maximum noise level. That's where I set up. I also set up across on the other side, on the west side of the property, which that is typically significantly lower in noise levels over there, and has been throughout the years. That's pretty much the gist of what I've been doing.
And I'll add to that, so during a concert, Dave will be there and with his setups in constant contact with our staff as far as how the sound levels are, and it's not uncommon in the grandstand. I'll walk by Dave, we're good, and if we aren't, he would let us know, and we would convey that to the artist performing. But again, I think with the changes we've made, we have not bumped up against those current levels.
And so when we're talking about the decibel levels, we're talking about the amount of sound that's being measured from the source to wherever those monitoring systems are, correct?
Correct.
So it's not right at the speaker that's at the grandstand?
No,
Okay.
no, and the way I believe the way the noise ordinance is written is that it's at the property line. What is the noise level at the property line? And the issue around with sound is, and you mentioned it earlier, with atmospheric changes, on a cloudy night, it's going to be noisier because everything's reflecting down. Whereas on a beautiful, clear night, it's, it could be extremely loud inside the grandstand, but out at the property line, it could be significantly quieter. And the further you travel away from the sound source, the lower the decibel levels get, just by the way the dissipation of the sound energy. So.
Amber?
Dave, do you think that there's been any changes since 2008 that would lead you to think that we should look at that decibel levels again? Or do you think those are reasonable still?
Yeah, they're reasonable. They are. I mean, at 83 decibels for an extended, it's a 5-minute average. It's pretty loud, but it's, for concert events, we're talking a 5-minute average. Granted, that is never, a violation in the entire time that I've monitored has never occurred. It's typically, if there have been violations, it's been the hourly average, which is harder to control. Yeah.
So when you mention things like the hourly average or the 5-minute average, can you just explain what that means?
Okay, so I'm collecting data points every 5 seconds. My meter it records a data point every 5 seconds, and I take that data and it calculates out an average decibel level over 5 minutes, over an hour. So I'm taking 5-minute or 5-second intervals and averaging them out over that period of time.
Before, I'll get to you in a moment, I just want to make sure that the trustees have had our chance to ask some questions, and we'll make sure to open it back up. Sarah, I see you're raising a hand.
I don't have a question, but before we get to a vote, I do have one final edit I'd like to ask the trustees to consider in the agreement.
Okay.
Can-
I'm good with that now.
Okay.
I have some proposed edits too. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. The first, now therefore, number 1, we hold a $2,000 security deposit in a separate agency fund in our books. And every year around April or August, we remit the $15 interest to CVE. That part has been taken out of the agreement the paying the interest annually, during the cleanup. But I would like to suggest that, since there's a fee structure for violations, that we don't also need to hold $2,000 as a security deposit on our books, so we could clean that up.
So how about we just take the amendments, because I understand that, Amber, you have some as well, if we just take them one at a time, debate the one before I go on to another one.
I'd actually propose that maybe we hear public comments and then deal with the amendments, if that's, can we do that?
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
I'm not opposed to it. Did anybody have any other questions of our guests before we go to that point?
Not yet.
No, I don't have one. I'm good.
Not yet, I may, but not yet.
We can still ask questions later on, but yeah. Okay, so now certainly opportunities for public comment on the agreements as they've been proposed. Chris, I saw your hand up.
So,
Could you state your full name for the record?
Chris Coyne, Prospect Street. I don't know where to start here, you've thrown out so many things. How about the hourly and 5-minute averages? As you pointed out, the decibels scale is a logarithmic scale. Are you doing a logarithmic average?
No, so the calculating of the average, it's not a logarithmic average, so it's, when you're calculating hourly averages, you're taking those measured decibel levels and averaging them. So what is logarithmic is the measuring of those decibel levels when it goes from 70. So I believe it's 6 decibels is a doubling of the of a loudness level, noise, and so your perception of noise is, if it was a doubling, it's not 140 decibels, it's 6 decibels. So like for a 78 decibel hourly average, if you were doubling that noise level, it would be 84 decibels. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which, when you're averaging it, if you take a simple average instead of a logarithmic average, you're basically dumbing it down. And I don't think anybody I'm surprised that you would even suggest that you wouldn't do a logarithmic average of a logarithmic scale.
I have, when I've done work for, noise monitoring work for the Act 250 permitting process, I've never heard that being questioned as far as measuring hourly averages because of, yeah, and then I would have to go look up the standards, but I'm fairly certain it's not a logarithmic average, averaging those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plenty of other places do a logarithmic average.
I'm not sure, but I'm not aware of that. At least here in Vermont, we're not.
Okay, then how about the actual reading? I went and looked at your report for the Franklin Graham event, and there's a 4.7 minute or 4.3 minute period there where it pretty much was over the 83 decibel average the whole time, and I think in your report it came out and said the maximum noise limit is defined as a sustained maximum 5-minute average. Well, I don't know where the word sustained came in. And you said in the established noise criteria limits of 85 dBA.
Oh, I put 85?
Yeah.
Oh, that was a mistake. It should be 83.
Well, I guarantee from looking at these points on this graph, you've got to be over 83.
Oh, yeah, you are over 83
Your
decibels.
average is over 83 in that 4
I
5-minute
could go
time.
back and look at the data, but I download the data and then summarize it into a spreadsheet.
I'd love to see the actual data.
A few minutes up. You know, that's, yeah,
It's the village data.
yeah,
Fine.
yeah, I can Robin, I can email you the Excel spreadsheet. What's that?
I'll just forward it to Chris.
Yeah, that's fine, I'll forward it to you, I'll just email you. Okay.
Let's talk about the A, B, and C categories. The A category is for the general fair. Has we got any idea whether they violated those limits?
I'll jump back on this. As far as we know from the board perspective, there has not been any violations of any of the categories.
Have we got any data that shows they didn't violate them?
I do believe that when there has been events, I have seen emails come across that say they
No,
haven't.
I'm not talking about the events, I'm talking about the A waiver, which has specific limits, hourly and 5-minute averages. And can anybody prove to me that they weren't violating that this year?
What I can tell you is that the emails after a waiver has been approved of and the thing happens, whether it's an event, whether it's not an event, something happens at CVE where sound gets measured.
But
There have been reports that come
What
to
I'm
us, hang on,
saying
Chris,
is-
I'm talking, please don't interrupt me. There have been reports that come to us that say, here's what the data is, it did not violate the ordinance.
Right, so, but the A waiver, which is for the fair, all 10 days, they don't measure the sound. So there's no way to tell whether they were within the defined limits of the A waiver or not. And you didn't get a report, because I suspect nobody actually monitored the sound. So having an A waiver is meaningless.
I hear what you're saying.
Let's talk about B waivers. The B waivers are used for, one size fits all. Having a waiver for a rock concert and for an overnight jamboree or camping that are exactly the same doesn't make any sense. You ought to have a waiver that puts reasonable limits on an overnight, on an event that extends all night long.
Okay.
Can I respond to that? Just because I've done some monitoring for the overnight events. And the noise limits that I evaluated to are basically the standard noise levels. So anything, I think it's past 11 o'clock.
So except you use a 5-minute average. You have a 5-minute average instead of an instantaneous maximum.
There is an hourly average, I believe the way the village ordinance is written, there's a hourly average and then a 5-minute.
No, the municipal code has an hourly average and an instantaneous maximum. And I think there should be an instantaneous maximum for any of these things. The idea that, the 5-minute average just allows somebody to make as much noise as they want if they don't do it for a long time. So shoot off a cannon at 12 o'clock at night, it's not gonna violate your 5-minute average. There ought to be something that's just out of the pale. And I get it, that some of those, I think of the whole SCART thing. We get all kinds of things, explosions, fireworks, whatever, in the middle of the night. And let me tell you, you're sound asleep, and, one of these goes off at 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It is unpleasant. Which is kind of why they have, and that's, I want to go back to the whole purpose of the noise ordinance that we do have. The ordinance is acted to protect, preserve, and promote the health, safety, welfare, peace, and quiet for the citizens of the village of Essex Junction. And by granting any kind of a waiver, you're basically saying to some part of the population, we don't care about your health, safety, welfare. I don't get it. And, I'll go to the fancy little chart, right? The guy yelling at 80 decibels. Well, what you're saying is, it's perfectly all right for the 10 best days of summer to have some guy in my bedroom shouting at me while I'm trying to go to bed for 5 minutes. And that's cool. It's just not right. You're abusing the neighbors of the CVE so that they can make some money. And I will say, Tim has done a great job of lowering things. So, I don't want to say that they're completely out of order, but I just think we're not getting as much protection as we should. Some events just shouldn't be held. And I think I'll say the Wolf's Guard event, because you can't control it. Let me just check my list here. I have to take issue with changing in the agreement the word noise to sound. That's just ingenuous, duplicitous. It's ridiculous. You want to change it to something, change it to sound pollution, because that's exactly what we're measuring. And I guess that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Chris. Hang on a second. We'll get comments from anybody else in the public, and then we'll come back to the board. Any other members from the public have something that they would like to discuss about this matter, or share with the board on the matter? Okay.
No, I appreciate what Chris brought up about category A, and if we're gonna have noise levels or sound levels, that you've gotta maintain. It's like having ordinances that we're not enforcing, so, I agree with you on that. As far as some of the other issues that have been brought up here, noise in the nighttime, I know there's a train that goes by. When I lived in Westford many years ago, I could hear the train up in Westford, and that train blasts the sound, and that would be right in the railroad for blasting noise. It's noise, everyone's impression of what is not acceptable and reasonable. Reasonable is very ambiguous, so I think the language in here pretty much is reasonable in my opinion.
Thank you, Dan.
I don't think we can find the railroad, they're federal.
No, I'm just saying, it's a nuance.
But I'm interested in what he's brought up about averaging a log scale, and I think he might be onto something there. And if nobody in this room can explain that, whether he's right or wrong on whether a simple average of a logarithmic scale is accurate or not, then I wonder if 5-minute average of a log scale, is that an average statistical method, or because a quick Google search is kind of coming up that it may not be.
What do you mean by accurate?
An accurate representation of an actual, we're trying, in a 5-minute average, we're trying to see if there's a sustained violation, right? That's the whole point of having it. And if we're dealing with a logarithmic scale, a 1 or 2 point change is significant.
Right.
And if we're setting a number, if we're taking an average, we very well could be flattening out that curve. So we're not really seeing the true impact. In other words, if you have 8 points or it's 85, that's significant. But if you flatten that down because you're averaging it incorrectly, then you're not getting a violation. I'm not saying you're right. I'm just saying I've had this much statistics, and it tells me that you may be. And we should at least know before we do this. And I hate to be the one to say that.
Well, I think if you have a logarithmic scale, which is 10 to the second, 10 to the third, 10 to the fourth, etc., and if you have a whole bunch of numbers that are 10 to the fourth power and a whole bunch of numbers that are 10 to the eighth power, and you average those 10 to the out and you get something like 10 to the sixth, I think that's an accurate, that's why I'm saying what's mathematically accurate and what's accurate in terms of our ears might be two different things, but I think mathematically it's probably accurate.
Can I just,
David?
I guess I didn't explain. So what is logarithmic is the actual measuring of the sound pressure level in decibels. So that is an actual logarithmic measurement. The decibel scale is designed to account for that logarithmic changes in the sound pressure, shall we say. I do a lot of work, not just environmental noise monitoring, but industrial hygiene, noise monitoring, and the way that I calculate the averages is similar to the same way as I'm calculating dosages for an exposed worker to noise levels. So it's the same calculations, and I'm coming up with when you're coming up with an average noise levels number, it's the same calculations that I'm using that I use here for the environmental monitoring. Did I confuse you?
I'm not confused.
No,
I'm
no,
just not
no,
sure
I
that-
was
I'm
just-
just not sure that's getting to the point.
Yeah, well, the point.
Just because that's what you've been doing, I'm not criticizing.
No, well, and
Just because
I'm
that's kind of what
following.
you've been using doesn't necessarily mean that, I don't know. I'm trying to respect his comment and his concern, and, you know, having concerts, having waivers, that doesn't bother me. I think this is what we're dealing with. We have the fairgrounds in our community, and it's important to people that it's here, and that's just kind of where we're at. If we're gonna go through this exercise, though, we should know what we're dealing with, that's all. And I'm a little, it's just me, you guys don't have to agree with it.
It's okay, Raj. The only thing I'd say,
I feel like
the one comment is, you're right, we have an ordinance in place to protect the health and welfare of our constituents. A lot of our constituents are over at the fairgrounds going to these concerts. And what about the health and the welfare of people who want to go out and attend a concert on it? So I think we're not holding rock concerts over there all winter, all summer long. I think that's what I said. I think there's a balance that has to be achieved here. That's pretty much how I see it. And I think, as I said, it's a work in progress. As long as CV is working with us and we're working with them and we're taking comments and we're all respectful, I think we're working it out. But I think we can't, CVE is here. It's like the jets taking off or the train, we can't find them. It could be made that, yes, we could control CVE, but, you know, if we live in a densely developed area, there's going to be noise, and people like going over to the fairgrounds and going to concerts. So I think we have to just accept that as part of our little urbanized area here. That's it.
Just to go back onto the average piece, so you do sound monitoring for Act 250 with the state, you said?
Yes.
And for employment purposes, I assume, is that OSHA related?
Yes.
And is OSHA and the state, are they okay with your processes?
Yes.
I feel that if the federal government and state government through Act 250 and OSHA, Occupational Safety Hazard Administration, are okay with an average, a raw average versus a the log one. I'm not gonna try that anymore. I feel confident that that's okay. Coming from the person, I can't even say the word right now. But,
If I could add just one thing, I've had a chance to talk with Tim and with Chief Gary about some activities that occur at CVE with some of the groups. I don't wanna single anybody out, but if you, we do not allow fireworks except for by village board approval. So there are fireworks, we do it for our 4th of July, the school district did theirs for homecoming, and then there were fireworks at Mr. Graham's event. Those are the only 3 that were approved this last year. If someone is over at the CVE and they are shooting off fireworks, they are in violation, not of necessarily the noise ordinance, that would have to be measured either as it was occurring or otherwise, but of our ordinance not allowing fireworks. So we have talked with the chief and we have talked to Tim, and there are some events that we probably will be looking to have police on site more during certain hours. And if they are guests of the CVE and they cannot respect our residents, then our police will be there to help them respect are residents. And so it is also not necessarily, it's CVE's agreement, it is what we feel is needed at the property, like many other events. There are times when we feel they need more security, there are times when we feel they need traffic calming and other things, and we have a conversation and we tell them how many officers and when. So we are cognizant of certain events, and we are dealing with CVE on a as-needed basis.
Appreciate that, thank you. Trustees, do we have anything, any other questions before we go to amendments or proposed changes to the agreement? Okay, so Sarah had put one on the table about essentially eliminating A or one, now therefore one on page 1 of the agreement. So, does anybody have a gut reaction?
For us, it's just administrative.
Mhm.
We have to do a lot of things with the audit and with the bank account and stuff, and there's no indication that the CVE is not gonna pay a fine when needed.
Yeah, I'd say, in my opinion, if it makes administration easier for it, I don't think that, I think CVE is good for it, so I don't think we have to keep, like a little security deposit here. I think it's okay, but if it makes life easier for you, either way.
I'm fine with it.
Just ask me.
Do we need a motion for that, or we're just gonna do it?
Just do
Might be some
Maybe we can just do it all
Let's
at
do it all at
once,
once.
possibly.
Did you have others, Sarah? Or was that
That's
that?
the only one I have, thank you.
All right. Does that then impact anything else further down in this agreement?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Someone I assume could look into that later.
Yeah.
Amber, did you have some?
I do. I would like to see an amendment to, of course, I'm not gonna be able to find this section, but, the waivers. Where, let's see, somewhere in here. A, B, and C. So B and C right now, B is historically been approved by the manager, or their designee, and then C is the same, I believe. As soon as I can find it, there we go, found it. The same. So I would ask that any waivers comes to the trustees and not be approved at the level of staff, because I think it's important that the public has an opportunity to weigh in on these and be involved in the process. I would also ask that, just because I'm still on that same tangent, I appreciate the changes that were made to the fireworks section, but again, we have approved the fireworks for homecoming and for 4th of July, and I don't know why we would change that process for CVE, so that should be something that's approved by this board as well. In my opinion, those are the changes that I would request.
So if we can just take it one at a time, if you don't mind. So the
Yep.
first one being, having, for category B and C, having the trustees be the approving entity and not the unified manager or designee.
Correct.
Okay.
George, or could
Yeah.
I comment on
Yeah.
this particular issue you brought up? There was an event, and I'm uncertain of the exact time, I think it was roughly 10 years ago. I think the guy's named Trey Anastasio from Fish came here and did a benefit concert, and that was not in the time that we could actually say,
Yeah.
hold on, you gotta wait, we're gonna do this.
Right.
So there's gonna be exceptions to that, just to let you know, so, I mean.
Once
I'll
in
deal
10
with it.
years,
Right.
I guess I'm willing to
Right,
this
well,
is a 2-year agreement.
yeah, I'm just saying, whatever.
I'm cool with that,
It's a good concert.
yeah.
Can I ask, though, about categories? Maybe, Tim, you could answer. I mean, is timing an issue here? How often do you have sort of changes and an artist cancels and you have to get somebody else in? Because it's not that I don't have a problem with what you're asking, but it's just, they have an opportunity or they need a big
Yeah.
schedule change and we just met. And so they need an answer in 2 days and we don't meet for 2 weeks. So is that a problem here?
I don't think so. I would ask to Dan's comment there, there's exceptions, that
Yeah.
some unique thing does occur that hey, there's a shorter window, or we have an opportunity to book event, and in a window of time, the approval, that there's an exception to it there, but for the most part, we're booking concerts right now outside of the fair for next summer. We can, for the most part, know who they, when those are occurring, so, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it could work.
I mean, is it possible to put a sentence in saying, I don't know what you'd be comfortable with, village manager in conjunction with the village president in the instance of a time frame that it is outside of the normal trustee meeting time or something like that?
Well,
I wouldn't want to hamstring them from.
Well, we can always, the thing is, we can always call it sort of a quote, emergency trustee
Right.
meeting, and we only need like, what is it?
Three.
Yeah, and it's really no skin off your nose either way, that's just an internal thing for us. You request the waiver, and who approves it doesn't really matter to you, I'm just concerned about our internal process.
And would it be a public comment for each approval then, or how to,
That's where I'm starting to go with the process.
I guess a little, as far as,
So what I would hate to see is, I would hate to see something come to the board and we start to politicize an event. If we use a realistic example, John Graham comes again, or requests to come again. Do we debate the merit of John Graham coming and having the concert? Do we debate whether such an event is worthy of the sound waiver? And I don't know if
That's an excellent
I wouldn't
point.
be comfortable having, I wouldn't imagine it would be more along the lines of hearing comment on the types of shows, the number, the dates, those sorts of things I would imagine that people may want to comment on versus, I wouldn't, do you provide the list of shows that?
if we know who they are, we do. For instance, we have clients who are holding dates where it could get awkward as if we're committing to concerts. Now, I'm talking outside of the fair.
Sure.
And we contract with XYZ promoter here,
Mhm.
and then they lock the band in, and then you, a month later, say, geez, no, sorry, folks,
Right,
we're in a terribly awkward spot.
Yep.
So we've contracted.
Yeah.
yeah.
Dan?
Just getting, comment, it seems like we're kind of micromanaging this issue. It comes down to more, now we're getting into what, if somebody likes maybe a particular band, the others don't like a particular band, it just seems like you really could get down in the weeds in this thing, and I think we should be at a higher level, just, as far as monitoring the noise level, sound level, whatever you wanna call it, and sticking to the rules that are set out, and, but as far as picking the events that are gonna be there, and I think that's just getting down, micromanaging the whole thing, trying to.
I don't think I ever had any intention of picking the events.
No.
I think it's more a matter of, right now, I can't even tell you what qualifies for a waiver. What got a waiver this year? Nobody in this room probably can tell you what qualified, with the exception of probably the folks sitting at the end of the table, what got a waiver. And so that concerns me. Like if as a resident, as what are we talking about here? And so if you bring those at least to the table so that they're on the record, per se, that's what I was trying to do.
Go ahead, Dan.
All the waivers are gonna be on file, so you could find out what gets a waiver by going to you don't have to go to the board of the trustees, you can go to the village and find out who's obtained waivers. Like I said, there's exceptions to the rules, they get a waiver on the spot. These are general guidelines, these are the rules that say during this period of time, they can do X, Y, and Z. These are the noise levels, sustained noise level for 5 minutes at 85 decibels, then it's a violation. But anything less than that, I think, as far as knowing exactly who got waivers, to what end, I can see you want, transparency and everything to be known to everybody, but you can get it. It depends on how you interpret, what you're saying, what you want to know. You want to know it by the board or the government, the village, putting it out in the paper, doing all these things? Or are you satisfied with knowing that you could go to the village offices and research and find out just as much as you can find out about somebody's property or somebody's taxes? It's, public information, you can do it. But I'm just trying to figure out what you're looking for.
So I think what I'm hearing, like Amber's concern, is not knowing what got a waiver. and not knowing,
But why, but she's not knowing it because it's not available to her?
I don't wanna,
I know what you're saying.
I don't wanna have to come in here and start going through files to determine what a waiver is, I don't.
Plus,
I don't
that's
know.
after the fact too, right?
Yeah, it is that, yeah.
Can I just ask a question about C here? It says, "The sound waiver category requires unified manager and/or designee approval, at which time specific dB limits, decibel limits will be established. Time will be provided for public comment on this category of sound waivers." When would that be?
So if I recall correctly, this may have been before the two of you came on to the board. There was a list of events that I believe came into a consent agenda possibly,
Yeah.
where that was then approved of at that point in time. I don't even remember if the document had the specific decibel limits. I'm apologizing that I can't recall that.
It had the A, B, or C category and the expected start and finish time and the date.
So that's pretty much what we're talking about.
Mhm.
Right, and so it came to us
Okay.
at that point, and
So on a consent agenda, but not really warned. Truly warned.
It's warned, I mean.
it's warned.
It's on the agenda.
It is something where if somebody says, can we take this off of the consent agenda, we
Yeah.
can have it be a part of a business item where we debate it more thoroughly. But yes, like tonight, when we get to the consent agenda, those will be approved of.
As I recall, that whole, back when we addressed that issue, when we had the events designated, and it stated, I remember something, we had a debate about the language, it stated in a day, remember, George?
Yeah.
And it said, because the Walk for Cancer, whatever, Kids Walk goes over, is it a 24-hour period, or is it a designated day from 0001 to 2400 hours? So that became an issue, I do recall that.
And that's addressed in here, it sounds like.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, maybe, we, and I'm just,
yeah.
continuing the conversation, maybe we'll point too far, but we asked that fireworks be warned in the grandstand, we asked that fireworks be warned in the paper. Maybe instead of just kind of slipping into the consent agenda, it just needs to be warned a little better. I don't know. And then if somebody actually shows up, and that's the trustee's signal that maybe this needs to come off the consent agenda. I mean, we're talking about this like somebody's gonna show up,
Mhm.
right? And oftentimes nobody shows up. And so, hesitant to put it in there because of that, but at least if there's a mechanism, I guess we just remember to do that, I suppose.
It sounds like it's more of an internal thing of when it comes to us, when the list, because I assume, again, you're doing this months in advance, you're not doing this for rarely are you doing this in a last minute sense.
Correct. You typically, about the end of each year, we submit a list for the coming year. For a lot of our events are repeat. And then, throughout the year, we're booking concerts, but usually by March, we know what our concert lineup is. Again, I just go back to the point, if someone doesn't like the concert,
Right.
all of a sudden, and I use it as an example,
Yeah.
I think the only time we've ever paid a fine was Elton John. We paid, I think, $10,000,
Yeah.
and but not one phone call, because everyone loves Elton John.
Can I suggest, maybe somebody, I didn't hear it all, but why don't you, instead of putting the entire list on the consent agenda, why don't you just make it, when it's produced, make that a business item when we formally approve it as part of an open discussion? That might be a happy medium between the two here.
And the way that this is worded, it would really come to us as an informational purpose.
Right.
It wouldn't come to us to make a decision on, but just to have here are the events that are coming,
Right.
go if you want, don't if you don't.
Okay.
Evan?
And I appreciate the conversation. I will caution you to limit any conversation that you have about the content of the people coming to these events in terms of someone like Franklin Graham, or whoever the absolute opposite of that is, or a band that you don't like their lyrics. Freedom of speech still exists,
Yep.
and you do not want to get into a debate of what you like, don't like, what's appropriate, is not appropriate. This is a sound and decibel level type discussion and some other things, but I would caution you to get into that. In fact, we had some complaints, how could we let Franklin Graham or someone of that to come to, and we had nothing to say about it, we didn't want to get involved in that.
I don't think we're saying that we're doing that.
And just a caution in the future.
Go ahead, Amber.
Appreciate the comment. as the probably only attorney sitting in this room. I totally understand that, and I, again, it was not in saying,
I know that was
I don't
not-
like Elton John and I don't want Elton John coming. That is not what I'm trying to do.
And I'm actually, I'll be
So-
honest with you, I'm shocked that he was the one.
I am too. I think we all in this room
Sounded
are
so good.
very
And I've
shocked.
seen him
The only one?
It's because
No, fish
he's
was-
hard of hearing, so he needs the volume.
I think I am perfectly
sound
fine
like
with
a-
putting a list or, you know, and somehow, I'm even okay with it being on a consent agenda as long as it's coming through here as opposed to
Okay.
under,
And I
you know,
would just, and the only thing I
for
would
those
say is,
two pieces.
if-
Fireworks aside for a minute here.
if there is, in hearing the conversation, if there is something that comes that is of an absolute time-sensitive nature, we can create a process by which people are notified.
Yeah. And we can always amend this. This is an agreement which can be amended by both parties if there is a need to amend the agreement at a later time,
Right.
too.
So it sounds like we're good with with Evan continuing to be the approving entity, and then they come to us. It comes to us to then have at least a public conversation about what's coming. If I'm understanding everybody right. So Amber, I think you had it, unless I'm wrong with that. If you want to say otherwise, I'm just getting a
Still
suggestion from the
want, you
board
still
that.
want to approve it on the consent agenda?
I still want to approve it. I mean, so I'm just trying to think about what the language, I mean, there's nothing in here that says it comes to us.
Right.
Nothing in here. So I think there needs to be language to that effect. So maybe
I think.
unified manager or designee approval, after approval by, I mean, I'm just trying to think off the cuff of like, not after approval by the board of trustees or after sharing, what's the word?
Even just a sub-bullet of all approved waivers will be shared at a public meeting in front of the trustees.
But you want it prior to approval, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so it comes to us and then it would be
For
approved. If that's-
consideration,
yeah.
possible amendment, although I
Yeah.
don't know how we would amend it.
I don't know how we would amend it either. I
For
don't know that we
dealing with
need
content.
to, but
I would say, like, it just goes back to having that conversation of what would we be approving?
the list, I mean, just,
Why would there be an instance where you would not approve of one?
I can't think of any.
And that's my only
Besides
pushback
Elton
is,
John.
I can't think of a reason why I would not want to approve of one for
Yeah.
mostly the reason of what are we then preventing from happening? Is it an anti-free speech issue?
No.
And not wanting to open this up. So that's really my only opposition to saying, I don't think we should be approving of them.
I guess I think the only real thing to approve is the number. And there's no one here tonight on the second night of discussion that has even brought up the number of waivers.
Mhm.
So I'm not
Yeah, no.
saying your ideas are wrong, I'm just saying, you know, as I think this through, the only thing that we could do then is amend the number, and doesn't seem to ever really be a concern about that.
I think there's a number in that noise.
I meant,
The number of
the number of
amount.
events,
I
20.
think there's a number of events limit in there, pretty sure.
So we have a maximum of 20 category Cs, and so there are some limits in here. Tim, have you hit 20 in the past?
Does that include the 10 days of the fair?
No.
No, it does not.
No.
No, we haven't. And,
Last year you hit 15.
yeah, yeah.
And that included the fair.
Include the fair, yeah. Yeah.
All right, be careful.
So,
Sounds like you're looking for opportunities for public comment
On a-
and engagement.
Yeah, but again, I'm
possibilities.
fine with it going on a consent agenda, and if we need to pull it off, then we can pull it off, but at least it's like on a warned meeting, it's out there, that kind of deal. So,
I think that's an internal process thing that can be managed, and I don't know if necessarily needs to be put into the agreement with CBE that what we will then do with that. I'm open to pushback.
I think I've pushed back enough on that issue, so I hear the board's comments on that.
Okay. If anybody else,
So do I hear the question, it's either should it be manager approval or village board approval? Is that really what it boils down to? So if you get if there's a waiver in category B or C, you'd like it to come to the board.
That's what I
And
said.
we can distill that down. Since it is incredibly rare, I have no objection to it coming to the board other than time. And so if you wanna put in something that says, unless it's within 2 weeks or something, then you can give me the approval and I have to notify the board. But my guess is, any contract you have is not gonna be within the last 2 weeks. That's a guess, I don't know your.
No, but, no, I don't see a scenario on a reoccurring basis.
I do know there are occasions, or there could be occasions, where someone else's venue failed, and you might get a
Yeah.
reschedule.
Again, that would be so unique, and that opportunity, I would ask for consideration because of the uniqueness of it. By no means is it the norm, we know, but, and I do like the idea that you're not making the decision based upon the type of music or who it
Yeah.
is. It's about the quantity of events there.
I will say, 4th of July concert at Shelburne Farms, there was a thunderstorm. Within 2 hours, everybody went to the concert at Shelburne Farms over at CVE to hear the concert inside. That's pretty quick.
Those things do, I mean, again, you have to understand, the band gets paid, rain or shine.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if, or whatever, that's just the way the biz works that I understand. And so you paid for the sound, you paid for the lighting, you paid for the band. If they can make it happen, they're going to try to make it happen. And so if they find a venue or something happens, so, you know, I've heard of, you know, there's been storms that have rolled through that have hurt a bandstand, and now they're looking for secondary places. So I would say that, so my thing stands, I would say that in general, categories B and C would then come to the board, and if it is something of an urgent nature, you give the manager the authority to do it in an emergency.
I just, you know, I foresee the case where this comes to the board and then say there is public comment for whatever reason. It's kind of like something we really, we're putting ourselves in a position where we're gonna have to decide what's reasonable. Like I said, it's ambiguous and it's preference, and what somebody says, I just don't see, it's a no-win situation. You're putting us to say, we're gonna approve this, and then we gotta listen to somebody because this is why we don't want this, and then we're gonna say yes or no.
Process.
Yeah, okay.
We go through it for individual, I don't know, we go through it for waivers and,
You go through it for almost every
Buildings
project
and-
that comes in that with an LDC, I mean,
Yeah, but we have, that's something we have the right to, we have the land development code, the things, but we can't do
get
something
this.
based on preference. The public, just as we've had an issue with this, with public, with planning projects and stuff, people that aren't informed, they say, we didn't get our way, so things didn't happen the right way. There's a code, and you have to follow the code. And there's an ordinance here, and there's a procedure for this, and now you're trying to circumvent that and say, we need to hear this, we're gonna decide, and decide based on public comment or somebody's opinion, what we approve or we disapprove, and I think it's a slippery slope, I don't like it.
I just want to clarify something. The LDC, if someone an applicant wants a waiver on an LDC, that doesn't come to us. That just stays with the PC and the
oh, yeah,
development director. In other words, it stays with staff. It doesn't come up to the trustee level. The PC can grant it.
stays with the PC, yeah.
Okay, stays with the PC, but it doesn't need to come up to the trustee level. I mean, isn't that kind of like a precedent? You know, can't we keep it at the staff, the waiver granting function at the staff level? Why does it need to come to the trustee level?
The waiver is still aired in a public forum at a trustee, or at a planning commission meeting and put on the record.
Okay.
I mean,
So basically, you're saying people can air their grievances about something or what they like or not, but ultimately it's gonna get passed. So it doesn't, I think you said earlier that you can't foresee any time where you wouldn't approve something, so it just seems meaningless in some ways.
I don't disagree in the sense that it will take 5 to 10 minutes of our time. But if it provides the opportunity for something that we hear constantly of, we never got a chance to say something, we never got a chance to say something, you know, chances are, we're gonna see this, nobody's gonna say a thing, we're gonna approve it. This gives someone an opportunity to be heard, and I don't feel very strongly about this one way or the other, I don't. But if it gives somebody the opportunity to be heard about something, if they have a valid concern, you know, 20, I don't know where 20 came from, I don't know where the 15,000 came from. We haven't reached 20, we've hit 15. If someone comes in and says, well, we haven't hit 20, we've done 15 for 10 years, why do we need 20? At least they got a chance to say that. Again, I don't feel very strongly about this, I could go either way, you know, this has been working fine,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to, you brought it up.
I think you're opening up.
I feel very uncomfortable saying in an open meeting that listening to a resident's concerns is a waste of time. I'm not sure that's exactly where you're going with it. I'm afraid that's how it could come off. I just don't want to agree.
But that's the whole thing, Raj, is that you're saying, I have no problem listening to a person's opinion on something, but when you bring them in under the auspices of what I believe they're gonna foresee is, I'm gonna be able to weigh in on this, I'm gonna be able to, just as we heard with Fort Pearl, we didn't get our way. And that's not the way it works, and they don't have that, so you're opening up something that could become a real issue, I think, and
I see your point.
I don't think what you're saying is that it's a waste of time.
No, it's not a waste of time, listen, I'm all about,
Right.
but it's,
Misleading.
we know about all the other issues in the community,
Yeah.
between the town and the village. There's a lot of people out there that don't know all the facts, they're very passionate about a certain aspect of what's going on in the government, but when they see something happen, they feel there's been an injustice done to them, but it's not, because the rules are the rules, and we're going to play with those, but I'm just saying, we're opening up more of that with this. I'm not against public weighing in on anything, but just being aware that just because you stand up before the board and you say this, you're not gonna necessarily get it, because the rules are the rules, it's the way it works, we're not gonna, say no to something that we can't,
So-
justify.
So, does anybody have anything new that they wanna say on this?
I think we're going around and around.
That's, okay.
Yes.
So,
We've covered all the bases here.
I said before,
Several times.
I
And
said
then
before,
some.
so I said before, let's just get all amendments out, and then we can vote on that. How about we vote on this one? And then we can approve it or not, and then move on to the others. Does that sound good?
That sounds fine.
So Amber, do you want to propose your amendment, and we can then have the vote on that amendment?
I guess I'll go with what Evan said, which is that, B and C, I'm not sure what the language is, it would be, approved by the trustees, except in emergency situations in which the unified manager or their designee would have approval.
Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? So again, just to clarify, this is just on that portion of who's approving of categories B and C. All those in favor of Amber's motion, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Nay. Nay. Okay, so that motion failed. Okay, so now,
Spirited conversation, guys.
we haven't done it in a long time, thank you. But now you had another one for
I
fireworks.
did, yes.
Okay.
So that wouldn't be, the fireworks is being approved again by the board of trustees, as opposed to the unified manager.
Can you remind me, where is it in the
That's a
agreement?
good question, I'm trying to find it.
Search
Page,
Actually, that might have been, no, it's on 14, paragraph 14.
Paragraph 14.
Page 12 of your
So,
Or page 12.
okay, of the sound indemnification agreement.
page 12 of the whole packet,
oh,
page 3 of the sound indemnification agreement.
Paragraph 14.
Okay. It is up on the big screen for anybody who can't see it on their tablet.
So say all requests for fireworks shall be made to the Board of Trustees a minimum of 60 days in advance of the event, as opposed to unified manager. Again, to be consistent with practice now.
So, can I
Go ahead.
ask you a question?
If you've got a question, go ahead, Raj.
So right now, it comes to us, much like homecoming did, is that what you're saying? And this changes that?
Yeah, so I
Okay,
mean,
alright.
I don't know that we had a lengthy discussion about there not really being written down as to how this whole process worked for fireworks, but since that discussion, which I think was triggered by Graham, if I'm correct, we approved the 4th of July fireworks and homecoming. So practice has been that we are approving those. This changes that.
But just for CVE?
But just for CVE. But I don't understand the distinction, why we need a distinction.
It would be as if somebody wanted to come and, if I wanted to have fireworks in my backyard, I'd have to come to us and say, 4 of you, please let me have fireworks in my backyard. Because I'd be asking for some kind of a waiver, permission to violate our ordinance, because right now we can't. So, I'm oversimplifying.
Yeah.
So this is essentially, right, I hear you. I don't have any adverse reactions to having it be us instead of Evan. Raj?
Have you ever denied a fireworks permit for CVE? Has the village ever, village manager, yourself, or previous denied a fireworks request?
I don't believe we've denied anything for CVE. We have denied requests for fireworks for other people, yes. They have to be done by a licensed fireworks person. It has to be time and et cetera. I think you may have caught something in here that was not intentional. The application comes to the unified manager. It goes through a staff process. The approval for fireworks is done by the village board. The reason for 60 days is to have that time to be able to get it through. So, what it's just saying is the application comes to me, but by practice and I believe the ordinance, fireworks come to the board.
Andy, can I clarify that? And just in context, as the volume at which we have fireworks, that was the first time, I think, in 10 years. So I mean, spend all the time you want on it, but it's really.
Totally.
No, I was just,
Yeah, no,
just
no.
know what
We
the
get
criteria.
a lot more from in the town, we get a lot more up at the Essex than we do anywhere else. And the town has actually denied many requests for fireworks at the Essex just based on time and the disruption of the community. So these would definitely come to the board.
Okay. Thanks, Evan.
You're good there? Okay. Did anybody have any other changes they wanted to propose? So then we can go back to Sarah's. Somebody remember what page on what document we're talking about?
I can make a motion.
Page 1?
Yeah.
You got it, Raj?
Oh, I had it.
Okay.
Page 1, you said, sorry.
Yep.
We're just looking to, if I understand.
Just
eliminate-
I would say,
strike
move
number
to
one.
strike the security deposit requirement
There you go.
for CVE from the agreement.
Second.
Are we gonna include this are we gonna do that amendment and then we're gonna vote on the whole?
Yes.
Okay. I thought you said.
Yeah. So there's a motion on the table, it's been seconded. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great. Now we can, if nobody has anything else,
I will make a motion that the trustees approve the noise agreement with CVE as amended.
Second?
I'm sorry, the sound indemnification agreement. Sorry.
Second?
any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for coming again.
Thanks, guys.
No, anytime, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
All right.
Sit still.
Business item 5F, there was a small storm that happened apparently, so let's talk about it.
Public Works crews are amazing.
Yeah, do it.
Joking aside though, while you're getting it ready, absolutely appreciate Public Works staff, their dedication. I happened to have been working from home at that moment or that morning, and took a little walk down to look at it as I live on Brickyard Road, and Rick gave me a nice little tour, so I got to experience it firsthand from a four-wheel drive truck instead of a tiny two-wheel drive car.
We have a little video
Zodiac.
of
The stream.
Yes.
Oh,
That is-
It's quite impressive. You are going to want to be able to watch the screen.
Oh, we got another one upstairs.
You're gonna wanna watch it on this
It's
side.
bigger over here.
Come on.
Sarah, don't overpromise.
We're gonna have to watch it on
Yeah,
our
but
phone.
This isn't a spreadsheet, we're in trouble.
Well, no, I want to see it here.
Live and in color.
We will take the time to watch.
So,
It's a video embedded in.
But describe it to us, Evan, while she's
Well-
queuing it up.
A lot of water.
How much water was
Is it
there?
a pitcher and a container?
Is it
So much more.
Was it more water than we lost in that water main break? It cost us, I won't go into,
The 1,000,000-gallon one?
yeah.
But that was water from
That was
from the
clean
Champlain
water.
water
Yeah,
district.
that
This
was
was different, this
is not
was
clean.
nature's water.
no, yeah,
This is
we
completely
actually
different.
paid for that water and then lost it.
This water didn't cost us,
It costs us a different.
Yay!
Ah, there we go.
Yay!
Okay. Just close there for a second, y'all.
I just don't want to Rick onto it fast.
Oh, you'll see.
Awesome.
And you will get a glimpse of Ricky's taste in music.
Ricky's taste in music.
What's he listening to?
It'll come up.
He's listening to the weather.
Oh, it's got like waves and stuff.
Yeah.
some white caps.
It's got some white caps. That's kind of kayak.
He's in a big truck.
That guy kind of took his life in it, all right,
Yeah.
whoever.
Oh, yeah. I can hear it now.
Could've got stuck there.
Smoke on the water, is that for
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
That's why this one was chosen.
Kids, you should
Oh,
not be
that's
doing this
really-
at home.
Probably all washed up. I don't know what the condition of the road is.
It's a good thing he's driving through that.
It's a good thing he's driving a municipal truck.
I know. Again, we don't encourage people to drive through water.
Don't do it like you.
I don't know how he's driving start and stop like that.
It's
That's
amazing,
Yeah, it's
isn't it?
fascinating.
pretty cool.
Again, it's a big truck.
I swear, nobody dubbed this song on the radio. So it's, oh,
Mason, they're trying to get water.
Wow.
Just too much.
It's Lake Geneva.
Okay.
All right.
That was
So-
there we go.
All in all, a very tough night and morning and the next day. Our crews did a very, more than admirable job. Densmore has been filled with stone. We are looking to do a temporary paving for the winter. And so it is open. In fact, right on the right-hand side of the screen, the condo association, that is their only entrance and exit to their, to the street. The town allowed them to open up the fence line that goes through the town parking lot so people could get in and out, including emergency vehicles. Until that was repaired, it is still open, and we will allow it to remain open, although it's coned off until it's paved, so that ambulances would be able, and fire trucks would be able to get through when that gets fixed. It should be the obvious that we do not ever recommend people drive through standing water or in this case, a small river, that is running through. It did take up.
Where's the hook? Where's the gap?
Good timing, Evan.
Yeah, there's whitecaps.
It's nice to see our village manager, our unified managers out there risking life and limb
Yeah.
Yeah,
to do some storm
beautiful
work.
Saturday morning.
This
Didn't have-
this hasn't happened. I've seen both of those bodies get pretty up, but I have never seen this.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Right? I mean, this has not happened.
There's-
Nick, has this happened before? I don't remember this happening.
4.5 inches of rain in my house,
Yeah.
right near there.
Yeah.
So, yes.
But breaking through, but those two bodies connecting is concerning.
Yep. Get used to it, apparently.
So
Yeah.
we have 25-plus-year veterans, they have not seen this particular
Yeah,
action.
that's concerning.
Wow.
On the far side of the sidewalk, you have utilities running through there, gas, electric,
Yeah.
and
there.
cable. We have culverts. So for those who, what you're looking at is, this is a stream that is connected to Indian Brook.
Right.
Is and so the Indian Brook Reservoir is all the way up in the town and up, I don't know, probably a couple 100 feet of elevation from here. And this is water that is connected through. So interestingly enough, all the water that was coming through contained within the stream banks. It came up, it went out a little bit, and past here, it went through all of the storm culverts, etc., including all the money just spent at Main Street, and
Awesome.
that culvert held beautifully. This did not. We have concerns as to the culverts and anything that was occurring previous. It could have been blocked, you don't know, because they are too cylindrical, you can't see through them. But in general, as soon as it overtopped, it started washing out the pavement. And it took out sidewalks, and it is definitely gonna need to be stabilized. We are filing with FEMA for the emergency, and we are hoping to get the 75% funding for its replacement.
Did Rick Hamlin have any comment about this? Did you consult with him? Has he had a comment? Has he looked at this?
I'm not aware if Ricky has consulted with Rick, but we can certainly ask him.
Well, I mean, I just, we were talking about the other day, there was not too long ago, there was a horrific rain event, and it backed up the culverts on Maple Street, across from the Maple Street Park, but then backed it all up down into the Mansfield area, and both of these streams on either side were affected, and they came up, but they didn't overflow the banks. And Rick did a pretty thorough analysis of what happened with that, and figured out what happened with that, and I'm only recommending, he might be able to have some insight here that the rest of us don't have about something that happened.
And the only thing that potentially there is a blockage further downstream, closer to the high school,
Yeah.
that is being removed as part of this, but we are not aware of anything other than a severe amount of rain in a short duration, and the concern that we are seeing storm intensity rise versus just things are sized for a particular type of event that can happen, not the intensity that we've seen.
What I can tell you just from the capital committee, because we've ranked the replacement of these culverts, both this one here, there's another culvert where if you go around that horseshoe further, there's another culvert up there, where both have been ranked. And Rick Hamlin, if I recall correctly, was at that meeting where we talked about the integrity, and at that point, he had said that yes, they're fine, clearly, if there was any concern, then it would have been raised to this level in terms of their structural integrity, but that yes, they're older and are getting to the point where they should be.
And I believe one of the original things is, if you had the money, you would probably go to a box culvert instead of a pipe culvert. Box culverts are much harder to obstruct, because they're, instead of a cylindrical, they're wide open, and they're taking the entire channel. But, either way, they are currently still operating, because I was over there earlier today, and there's water flowing through them, so they're not obstructed.
And there's another
Drain
culvert
pipe,
pipe that's
right,
only
puts some drain in there, that's what's happening.
Takes like
So-
a line.
But all in all, the village, so one other thing that occurred during the storm, because apparently it is deer hunting season, several people, in the town, Public Works were off that particular Friday, and village sent 2 employees up to the town to be able to drive trucks because they had their CDLs, because we were moving, the town took a lot more damage, in the unpaved road area.
I was gonna ask if there was any joint work done, because my mom's up on Pettingill, and that took a huge hit. Not the usual flooding hit, but it took a, and the speed that I keep hearing with which things were repaired, or at least addressed, was just incredible. I mean, all over the community, it was really,
And I'll throw in another one, a shout out to Don Weston Excavating and Paving. We have used them many times in the past. They're an excellent contractor for us. I'm sure their phone was ringing off the hook. One of their crews was here in the village in the town. And so, that's part of that speed. And, our crews jumped on it. We immediately ordered stone and other materials from local suppliers. So quick thinking by several people to get those materials, or it would not have gone as quickly.
One last thing before I move on, the new storm retention pond, did you mention this? Yeah,
I was gonna do that.
Oh.
Fairview,
held, it all worked
cool.
exactly as it's intended to work,
Perfect.
Wow,
just
awesome.
water came up,
timing.
stayed within its banks, came down.
That's pretty.
Nice.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Kind of like New Orleans, you know?
Yep.
Except New Orleans.
Too soon. Too soon.
After a wicked rain.
Wiki.
He's a Vermonter.
Totally.
You know, he should make some narrated tours,
Yeah,
community tours.
So we're really pleased with that.
awesome.
So we just thought it would be nice for you guys to see this and the interaction with the village and the town. And in fact, I was talking to Ricky, we have not had a FEMA event, a qualifying event in the village in quite some time, so he's not quite familiar with the process. Where the town has had a few over the last couple of years, so the town is helping the village file for its FEMA paperwork.
Well, we really appreciate all the work that the Public Works Department did to help keep us and our neighbors able to get to and from, keep us safe. Not allow me to go up Brickyard Road and to go around so I don't get caught in that. Greatly appreciate that and their swift response as well. Also, just personally, really appreciate the town opening up the fence, so that way those residents are not stuck. So, thank you.
It's a neighborly thing to do.
Great, so now we can go on to 5G, an update on downtown development. Hello, Robin.
Everybody got the memo, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Sort of self-explanatory. Do you have any questions?
That's it?
I've been looking forward to you reading it to us.
I had a copy, I would.
There's one behind you.
Robin, can I ask it right off the bat? So I know, I want to say the building, I saw this building when it was, the application was, that's intended for this site over here, that's happening now. What is but do you have a sense of their schedule? Are they going to be building through the winter or
We're gonna
what?
try and build through the winter, a little
Okay.
bit late starting, but that's their plan at the moment.
Okay.
How far far back up, so I looked at the elevation, how far back off the sidewalk, is it similar to Fort Pearl, or is it closer to the road?
It's closer to the sidewalk, which is in line with the land development code, but they have given us small little parks either side. And they couldn't put underground parking in there, so the building's actually gonna be over surface parking towards the back.
My other observation is I think the PC did a good job with this. I like the way this looks. I think it blends with the rest of the architecture that's going in around here. So you're not happy with it?
Well,
Okay.
it's a fine brick building, but it looks like it was designed in the 60s, 70s, not.
This was designed in the 1820s.
Yeah, I know. I was just hoping to get a bit of the 2019
Yeah.
into the tapestry of history, you know. And you'll see that with some of the other buildings that were approved, especially the one on the south side of the
Yeah.
road is an exceptional building.
But, you know, it's nice. It works.
It's pleasant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cornice looks good, I like the,
Yeah.
I like the design, I
Yeah.
don't have any problem at all.
I do believe there may be a restaurant already, they've gone already signed up, the post is signing up to go into the building on the entry level, which is nice to get the entry level.
Rob, do you have something else?
Is 9 Park is that the one where they were discussing the parking garage?
Yes.
We have a status on that.
Yeah.
It's, they were approved for preliminary by the planning commission, they're coming in for final. If they get through it, it might come the 3rd week in December, but probably more likely to be January in front of the planning commission.
And the parking garage is part of the approval? Someone asked me about lighting in the parking garage recently. They had heard about it and were concerned how exterior lighting on the top deck might be mitigated. Is that something for the planning commission?
Well, they're actually looking at the top level of making it, I'll use an Irish word, veranda. Rather have parking on the top level, it would be an area for residents to go to. We're looking at that as that wasn't part of the preliminary approval, they're looking at that as their final approval.
So that would reduce parking.
There wouldn't be any cars at all on the top level.
It's just a hangout?
Yeah, hangout. It's great views.
Okay.
So wouldn't that impact the parking that they would need for the building?
No,
No, why not?
because it's an extra layer, it's not using parking.
So they put another deck on?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying?
It'd be like
I thought it was the
a
third.
patio.
All right. I thought they were replacing a parking deck with,
I can't visualize it.
No, sorry. We haven't seen the plan for it, it's just in discussion.
You haven't seen the plan? Is
To
it?
put a patio on top.
Okay.
The preliminary plan is very, very similar. Much details we want to go into. I'd suggested that 3 sets of steps going up the street. I suggest take out the middle step and create a nicer plaza outside the stores, maybe with a fountain. They preferred a fire pit, but I still like the fountain idea.
A fire pit?
I don't know, that there is, that's appropriate for a fire pit.
Well, you know, you mentioned the veranda thing, as you so called it. There's a brand new building in downtown Montpelier with a transit center attached to
Mhm.
it, where they have such a thing, overlooking the river and the bridge. And it's quite nice when it's done right, so it can go well.
Then there have to be vegetation up there as well, just to give shade to the people in that actually is.
I see here with the Crescent Connector, that the railway is having their pre-bid meeting this month.
Yes,
Is that-
very excited about that, actually.
So has that happened yet, or is that later
No,
this month?
it's next week.
Okay.
This week? Next week, date's today.
The 12th.
This week. So, we'll meet on site, we'll do a walkthrough with contractors. And I'm hoping they can get started quite soon, because it's not just the new crossing for the connector road, it's also Park Street crossing, Central Street crossing, Main Street crossing, Main Street crossing. So, Summit was supposed to be part, of Pearl Street, but they decided to bundle them all together, thought they'd get a better price. What this is actually going to do is, they're just going to put in, if you've been West Street Extension, they're going to put in concrete panels, which are much more durable. And once blacktop gets fixed, it's never quite the way it was when it was pristine. This will be much smoother ride when you go across these things. And all the roads are going to get vehicle gates and pedestrian gates,
That's
which
great.
makes it much more safer in the village.
That's great.
That's great.
Good.
That's just that's almost worth the whole project right there.
And I see that your note there that would be completed in 2020. Just
Yes.
that portion of the Crescent
Yes,
Connector,
fingers
the railroad
crossed.
crossings would be done in 2020, not the
Yes.
Crescent Connector itself.
No, because, well, V-Trans prefer that you go out to bid in winter. So even, with the best will in the world, we probably wouldn't be ready for the road until spring. So they want us to bid the road in winter 2020. And it's only a one season build, so then we'd be built as soon as possible, spring 21.
What's the status of the bike racks for that corner?
They arrived late October 26th or 27th. Published them sort of busy.
Yeah, no, that's fine, I just didn't know if they were here.
They're very cute.
Hmm?
They look good.
Good.
Green one, the yellow one, we just need a white one.
I wonder how that got in there.
Why is that one? Never mind.
And I saw your note about Railroad in Maine. Could you, this isn't the business portion, this is the upstairs?
No, it's the building itself doesn't look the way the planning commission approved.
What's the difference?
Well, there were supposed to be pilasters on the front up through 3 stories. It's like dummy columns, it's only half a column, it's applied to the building. Canopies, landscaping, the pediment at the top isn't right. Other smaller details. So because it's a local business, we did something never done before. We give them a temporary CO. Nothing really changed. So they came in front of the planning commission last month. And the planning commission asked John Alden and myself to work with their architect to try and get to something that we'd all be happy with.
Right.
Didn't happen. So because of Essex Junction, we get another extension until June of next year, but that's it. And they've been told that there's no more extensions. They have to have it completed by June of next year, or their temporary CO expires and it will not be renewed. And
Yeah.
I was actually at that meeting of the planning commission, and just personally, I appreciate the planning commission members who were open and spoke to that truth and spoke to the difficult issue that was, and are able to and willing to hold people accountable. So I appreciate those planning commission members.
it was the original design. To me, it looked like somebody could arrive on their horse and tied up. It had that sort of look to it.
Yeah.
There's nothing about the existing building that has anything to do with it.
You can't bring your horse, yeah.
The color's not right, the architectural details are missing, it's.
Anybody have anything else for that topic?
No, we'll bring it up later.
Okay. Okay, you could- Oh, I'm sorry, Nick. My head was down.
Nick Meyer from Pleasant Street. I just have a couple of comments on the downtown development that's been going on. And I feel that as you've approved the new comprehensive plan, that we're finding that it does not necessarily jive with the land development code. As you've endorsed the Design 5 Corners and the thoughtful growth, there are a few portions of that are not being met. I look at the new building adjacent to the Park Street School. There's really no connectivity to the existing streetscape. It's going to be a flagged little sidewalk demarcation down to the main street. And that's not really what the intent was of the Design 5 Corners and what we want our downtown to look like, with connectivity, pocket parks. In that case, there is literally no green space for a resident to go out and enjoy. Same with the case in 4 Pearl Street. There's no outdoor area at all. If they have dogs, which they're being allowed at all the places, there's no picnic table. Yes, we managed to get some amenities in the front with trees and benches. But I think as we look down the road to some of these other developments coming in, we really got to try and integrate what you've approved in the municipal plan so that they jive. And I think there's a lot of people saying, well, we'll get it all once we close off Main Street there. That may never happen. But for all these other developments that are coming in, we need to hold the developer to a higher level, not necessarily grant 100% lot coverage, because we got to look out for the people in these buildings. You know, we want them to enjoy this downtown area that they're in, and I think we need to require a few more things for them. I mean, I look at some of the developers in Burlington and other places, and you look at, they have, and I know we can't dictate what happens inside a building. They have bike stations, they have pet washing stations, they have all these other things. They have outdoor areas with barbecues. They have all this stuff that there's nothing on these buildings. So I'm hoping in the future we'll see something more.
Does the new building going up here on Maple, that's coming with some bike facilities?
They have bike facilities. It's interesting Nick brought that up. Also, the other buildings that are part of Phase 1 have bike facilities. There's a swimming pool. There's 3 or 4 picnic areas. There's also, right, from the final still. Maybe modified. There's a bike area in the new building coming up for 9 Park Street. And with the senior building, there were a few changes made after it was approved. And where the trash collection area is going to be, it's not going to be a pergola with the sitting area and so on, just outside the front door for residents. And there is going to be a sidewalk, a new sidewalk put on the developer's property at the 911 Park Street facility that goes up Park Terrace and turns in towards the building.
Is that what we got the easement for?
No, we asked him for that as part of his application.
Trevor, you also want to say something?
Yeah, Nick, I'm trying to understand, are you saying that the specific applications or are you just saying generally we're not adhering overall to the intent, or I'm trying to get like specifically?
I think it's in changing some of the code in order to address what we're looking for in this planning process.
Okay.
To require another level of certainty.
My only, I agree what we need to be looking, we need to be vigilant about that. The only thing I'd say in my mind, the one building, the senior building, I call it the senior building, it's probably not the correct, but the building's going next to the Park Street School. I mean, I looked at that, that's sort of off the main track. It's up behind the rest of the development we're intending for Park Street. I'll put it very simply. I think if we had said we're going to put that building down on Park Street, I would have assumed that the Planning Commission would have given it a much harder look. I'll put it that way. But the fact that it was behind, and also the intent is for very affordable senior housing, in my mind, that was a good balance. I don't know if you have thought about that.
Oh, I've walked all around it. Now, I'm just looking for someone who wants to come outside
Yeah.
and sit by their building and not necessarily have to take a hike down the road to whatever place.
Okay.
To enjoy some outdoors in a treed area. And I thought at one point they were going to do something in the back right-hand corner, the upper portion of it, but it seems to be a wetland area now, because it's a total hollow, so no one can be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Nick.
Sure.
So then if we're all set there, that would bring us to 5H, speaking of sidewalk in Park Terrace. This is, Robin, if you wanted to talk a
Yeah.
bit about what this is?
This is something we've been working on for a long time. One of the properties turned over, one of the property owners had a change of heart. So verbally, the property owners on the north side of Park Terrace have agreed to give the village a 5-foot easement to put in a sidewalk. It would run from School Street right the whole way down to the existing sidewalk that's part of the Fort Pearl Street project. At the moment, they're willing to do that at no charge to us. There is a cost for us to get the survey done and to pay for the easement deed, to go through the village attorneys. I don't think we're talking about doing it anytime soon. I just think we're talking about securing the right to do it at a future date when the trustees, the capital committee think that's something that should happen. It is the narrowest street in the village center and it has no sidewalk.
Is the portion you're talking about, this is the one, just trying to get my bearings, this is the one that has the utility side?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're looking from Park Street, it's the right-hand side. There's a bit of sidewalking already, you're going past the parking behind Fort Pearl Street. And then you've got 3 buildings. But 2 of the property owners were adamant that they wouldn't let us have that, and 1 was bought. And the middle property owner changed his mind and said, yes, we could do that. And we had the discussion with the person who renovated the building at the corner of Park Terrace and School Street, and they were amenable to doing it as well.
Where would the money come from?
Evan?
Oh, you know, it is not budgeted, and it has been, this project was put on through the capital committee, and it did not rank nearly so. There's no money budgeted for this activity. And before we get 5 feet, so my question to my learned colleague is, what was the plan? It's about $8,000 to $10,000 to do the engineering work and the deed easements and some legalese for the village attorney to go back and forth. It is a narrow street, but I don't know where this project came up or where it's been in its history, but
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the project came up, I think it has its origins with everything that started with 4 Pearl Street. We heard a lot from the folks who lived on School Street up behind there. And although it was, this building was totally within the LDC, we were hearing people, their sense of the community, their sense of what was going on was significantly disrupted. And they were seeing a lot of cut-through traffic coming through. And they also, at that point, pointed out to us that although we said we wanted to see walkability and connectivity, here was a very central developing area that had no sidewalk in it. So I think we had a couple of hearings, and my memory's a little hazy, but we initially talked about blocking the top off altogether.
We had 5 or 6 conversations.
I think we had a number of different little plans, and I can remember them all. I don't know if you remember, and we talked about putting bollards across, making a little plaza up at the top, putting a sidewalk down one way, putting a sidewalk down another way. We had a photograph of a bunch of someone with a little daycare center walking with the kids in this constrained area with a truck trying to get by. So there was a lot of history and trying to come up with some solution for that, because it is kind of at this point it's kind of a burdened area, with the development that's going on around it. So I thought we had. I don't know exactly what we had in mind, but I know that putting a sidewalk down on one side or the other was a plan, as well as blocking off the top of it. And in my mind, since we just saw that the building going in on the corner, that looks like that's going forward. So again, that's going to add to the pedestrian, the desire for pedestrians to be moving and walking around in there. So in my mind, as we've seen with property easements, sometimes they can be tricky to obtain, and so if we can get the easement that allows the Development Office and maybe the Planning Commission to look at this and think creatively about what they would do with that, I'd be in favor of it.
Go ahead, Raj.
I would completely agree. I think if we can get this, we should get it, we should figure it out, use economic development funds, whatever we have to do.
Strike while the iron's hot, because I don't want to just lose this gem.
I mean, that's that whole, like you said, that whole quadrant in there is just gonna get, we've got the seniors coming in now, we've got that new building coming in. We just have, I mean, it's in the area, and I think that's just, kids walk down there, they're walking in the street. I think we just, we're not gonna build a sidewalk now, but anything we can do to get it, feels like a good idea.
My only question is, so that building, for lack of, at the top of Park and School, recently sold. The buildings on Pearl Street, then also the health place has been sold and is listed for sale again. There's another duplex that was listed for sale not that long ago. Is that corner or quadrant all within the downtown village center where
Yes,
theoretically everything could look like Fort Pearl does?
Theoretically, yes. There are some historic buildings there too, which would be a problem, but yeah, the Disney Village Center is on the east side of School Street.
So if we were to buy these easements, does that help or hurt in terms of any future development possibilities?
No, doesn't do anything.
Can I don't want to interrupt.
All done.
In terms of our penny on the tax rate economic development fund, and I know we just recently talked about not hitting staff with all kinds of requests to come up with calculations and numbers and so forth, and so I don't wish to do that on the one hand. But on the other hand, I'm wondering if that, it seems like we couldn't, I'm wondering how much money is in that account. And I know, again, I understand it's not a separate piggy bank with the money, it's just an accounting thing. But in terms of the total lifespan of that account, there should be a significant amount of money in there. We're talking about some other purchases with that. And it seems like this is would be an appropriate use, but I don't know how much money is in there and what the numbers are.
Offhand, I can't remember what we have earmarked those funds for, and what that tallies up to. But as of June 30th, 2019, there was $324,000 in the fund. That being said, I do believe we have earmarked,
About
a
half.
chunk of it. That feels reasonable. So that leaves about 150, and it's slated to gain an additional 110,000 during this fiscal year.
So a $10,000 expenditure is not.
I think my worry would be that the landowners would change their minds or
Well,
something
I
would
mean,
sell, right?
They may have already.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Not this.
So if it is of the board's consensus to move forward with this, we would earmark it for economic development funds, authorize staff to enter into negotiations to obtain the easements.
I'm personally fine with it. I just want to get the sentiment from the board. Again, so my memory of that village meeting when the penny was approved of is that we would hold at least one public hearing at any point in time that we would use these funds. Did this just count as that? Or do we need to then re-warn another hearing to say we're going to spend money or appropriate money from that penny?
I don't recall exactly, I thought there was a cap on the money that could be spent. And that when exceeded this X dollar amount, then we would do that, but.
It was just, it's not something that was voted upon as a part of the motion. It was one of those things that was discussed from the board that we would do this when this comes up. Again, I don't want to lose the opportunity. And I don't know if a 2-week delay would do that way.
Did we just use some of those monies for the bike racks over across the street
Right.
without a separate hearing?
We did. I mean, but on the other hand, I don't have if you wanted to put it on the agenda and have people come and talk about it, I think that's fine.
I don't think anyone will, but Sarah.
Just to recap, back in February, or January 22nd of this year, we had this conversation, and I have the memo up, and in reading, I'm just gonna read from it, it says, in reading the minutes, the village is under no obligation to bring expenditures or use of these monies to the voters. Discussion of the article included the assertion that any expenditure would be discussed at a trustees meeting and public comment would be gathered. That's it, and then in 2021, it'll come back up as an article to either be approved again or sunset. That's all the restrictions.
Take the opportunity to have just take the opportunity to ask the question, is there proximity enough, is there any opportunity to seek this as a condition for 9 Park? With the extra people and extra capacity that we're putting in that building, is there any, we buy the easement, is there any kind of proximity or way to say, please put the sidewalk in?
He's already putting the sidewalk in on the other side, on his property. It's gonna be for public use.
Which way, which side?
The other side of Park Terrace.
The other side of his, so the opposite side that we're buying?
Yes,
So the other side that we're easing?
yes, but only for the depth of his property.
So what's prohibiting us from asking him to do
And we've
that?
also asked him to give us 12 foot of his frontage.
So what's,
We've asked
I'm
him
pushing,
once.
what's prohibiting us, well, this is kind of what Nick was talking about a few minutes ago. What's prohibiting us from saying, yeah, 12 feet, sure, naturally you would put a sidewalk in up the side of it, why wouldn't you? That would be a normal expectation, I would think. But is there, I'm just laying it out there, so, because I would love to say, sure, let's use $10,000, and then let's ask the developer that's bringing a lot of those people in to finish off the sidewalk. I'm not saying we should, I'm just
I can
saying.
certainly, no, don't worry, I have no problem asking.
Yeah.
He's already had preliminary approval, and that wasn't part of the discussion. And generally speaking, with preliminary approval,
I'm not surprised about it.
we have conditions, and they have to meet those conditions before they can come back in. But, having said that, he was approved for 4 Pearl Street, and the dwarf walls were concrete. And after he got his final approval, we asked him, could he face them with granite, and he did. So it's maybe worth an ask, I'll certainly ask him.
And I
I mean,
think,
is this the same owner we helped out with the
Same.
parking garage, right? Is this the,
Yep,
right?
but we can't. No, I think we're not
No,
I
discussing.
don't think we
Yeah.
can yet,
Okay.
yeah. It's all good.
But there's nothing, this is just.
I will ask him, don't
This
worry, I have
just
no problem
puts,
with that.
this just allows us to have control. It doesn't, we're not building anything.
No.
We're just getting the easement.
Right.
This could be, we could be a long way away from actually constructing a sidewalk there. And you're right, we could ask one of the developers, or maybe some of them would pitch in and
Right. Well, I will ask him.
between the two
In
of them.
fact, I'll ask him
Force
tomorrow.
them, ask them.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And along those lines, so if we have a sidewalk that's going to be, it's not going to go the entire length of the road, does it make sense to help use those funds instead of putting it partway up the street, to just go across the street and go to what would create?
Well,
open
this
next-
sidewalk ties into the parking garage. So when people park, they're
Okay.
coming up onto the sidewalk and coming on Park Street.
That makes logical sense. And just going back to my original point about, and then public comment, I think we have heard a fair amount of public comment on my years in the board when 4 Pearl was being done about the desire to have such a thing come in, so I'm
right.
okay. So from the sounds of it, you need a motion to appropriate the funds from the penny on the tax rate, essentially?
Yes.
So what I just said, good enough?
What I would suggest is that you recommend staff work with the village engineer and attorney to obtain easements for a sidewalk from the corner of Park Terrace and School down to its terminus, and use economic development funds.
What he said.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
That sounds better.
Second.
Okay, Ross seconded that. Any further comment on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Robin. I've lost where I am on the agenda.
Thank you, Sarah and Evan, too. That was good input.
Yes, thank you. So we're on, very tiny. 5H. Nope, 5I. The warrant public hearing for, yes, New Road. No.
Yep,
Yes. Okay.
it's a big one. I don't know how you're.
It's a big one. So this one for the real estate matters, though, we were gonna have this portion 5I in executive session. Seeing as we still have another item after it, 5J, if the board is okay, can we go into executive session at the very end of the meeting?
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, let's go to 5J. Don't worry, Robin, won't take long. So on to 5J with the conducting a hearing. Or setting the date for the hearing.
Setting a date.
Yep.
You want me to tackle this?
Yeah.
We need to set a date and have a warning so that we can do the compensation necessity hearing?
That's correct. Yeah, because of it being a new road, you have to set a date for a warning of a hearing for necessity. We are also looking to do the necessity and the compensation portion of that process in the same evening. It is a legal proceeding. You also have to do a site visit. Luckily, it will be the beginning of winter. It'll be Tuesday, December 17th. One other of the items is that, I think I'm not sure it is actually written in the state statute, but it makes sense, that is to be done in the daylight.
Right.
So when you go out and do the site visit, it should be in the daylight. Therefore, we are looking to start at 3 p.m. so that it can be concluded still in the daylight, I believe.
4:13. Sunset's
Exactly.
4:13.
4:13.
It better not be late.
Yeah, so, the hearing will start in this room. It'll be gaveled to start. We will go out, do a site visit, which luckily it's a block from here, block and a half. See the site, answer any questions on site, come back here, do the hearing of necessity of the road. This is where the village and the village's staff will present the necessity for the road, what it's entailed in, all the work that it is. Any objectors to the road or persons in the audience can speak to that, and then that part of the hearing will close, and then there'll also then be a portion of the hearing that is based on compensation for any of the property owners that are not yet agreed to for their land that will be needed to complete the road. There are a couple different types of land necessary. There are temporary easements that are needed for construction. There are small easements where we may need a pole or something of that, and then there is actual tract of land that we need for the alignment and the placement of the road. As I understand it, right now, we have one property owner who has not agreed to their valuation.
And so what's different this time around, since we've done this once before, is that we're going to do the necessity hearing, which we've already done, but we're going to do the necessity hearing, and then right after that, we're going to then go into the compensation hearing. I would just like to let the board members know that this is the same night as a scheduled joint meeting. With that said, if you could, I've already talked to Elaine, but if you could also just let the select board know that we need to prioritize this, and that if we are running late, if they don't mind just hanging tight, we will get done what we can get done. Great.
The last time we did this, we did it well in the time prescribed that we thought it would be. It did run a little long, but yes, we will also make sure that the second portion of the meetings, which is a joint meeting with the village and the town, people are well aware that this is occurring.
Does anybody have any questions? Who wants to read the paragraph?
Yeah.
Move that the trustees warn a public hearing for Tuesday, December 17th, 2019 at 3 p.m. to begin at 2 Lincoln Street, Essex Junction, to initiate proceedings and a petition pursuant to 19 VSA Chapter 7 to lay out a road to be named Railroad Street, a portion of the Crescent Connector project, including associated parking areas, appurtenances, and improvements, and to determine whether property owners through whose land the new section of Railroad Street passes or abuts are entitled to damages and the amount of those damages. The new section of Railroad Street is to be located beginning at a point on Park Street just south of the New England Central Railroad, NECR, Burlington Branch, and then extending along the southeast side of NECR's Burlington Branch and crossing NECR's main line, Roxbury subdivision line, continuing north along the east side of NECR's, continuing north, along the east side of NECR's main line, Roxbury subdivision line, continuing north to Maple Street. The new parking area is located east of NECR's main line, Roxbury subdivision line, and adjacent to the new portion of Railroad Street. The proceedings will include notifying persons owning or interested in land through which the highway may pass or abut, posting notice, scheduling a site visit, and holding a public hearing on the matter where testimony may be received. The Village Board of Trustees will determine damages only for those properties that may have not previously provided an easement or come to an agreement with the village as to damages.
Second.
Any further discussion on that novel?
No, it's good.
Here?
Seconded, Amber?
Yeah.
She did. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Dan, I think we-
Last week?
What? Dan, I think we owe you something on that one.
Yeah, we do.
I can think of something, but we'll save that for after the meeting.
All right, so that will then move us on to the consent agenda, I believe.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I have just a typo in the minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay.
it's silly, but in, paragraph, in section B, paragraph 3, the third line, it should be increased by at least, not at least. It just jumped out
Oh,
at me.
good catch.
That's all.
Section B, what?
Section B, third paragraph, third line,
Mm.
by at least half the rate as opposed to lease. It's silly, but that's all I got.
I had a friendly amendment to change my name, which is misspelled a couple of times. I mean,
You know.
I don't care, but.
Okay, so any other amendments or proposed changes? Someone like to approve the consent agenda with the amended minutes?
Or George can just accept it.
I will make the motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Can go into the meeting file, and I just want to point out a couple of things. The very nice letter about the responsiveness to Public Works, which I think
Yes.
we also witnessed a good example of that this past Halloween storm, as well as the letter from Attorney General T.J. Donovan about the opioid class action lawsuit. Certainly something that has been in the news a fair amount, just to make sure we're all on board in case somebody asks, as it is, again, in the news just about everywhere. But other than that,
Are we participating in that?
according to my understanding from the letter, is that all municipalities are in essence put into the class action unless we want to opt out of it. I would say personally, I don't know if the Village of Essex Junction has the financial capabilities, if you will, to really put out a lawsuit on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my gut
So we're not
reaction.
gonna opt out, good.
There's really no.
There's no reason to. Yeah.
I don't see one. Do any board members have any other comments?
You're talking about board members.
Board member comments in general, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I do. There was an email that was sent out from Lana
Yep.
Knight, Benvenuto, and I mentioned, I responded to her and replied to her and said that I would mention it to the trustees. I support that Hometowns Heroes initiative, and one thing that comes to mind, it's not this exactly what she's saying in supporting this, but if you travel over into New York and going down through Ticonderoga, they actually have banners on the poles, and they're actual residents or people that live there at some point for different service, throughout the history of the community. And it's quite moving, it's nice, very nice.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I did also email
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
I copied Evan on it and asked that if staff can go ahead and,
Yeah.
if she can do some research, bring us some information as to what this is, as I personally
Yeah.
hadn't heard of it before or seen it. And had asked staff if they can do some research and bring that back to us to talk about at some point in time.
Well, I could probably
Near
show you
future. Yeah.
next meeting, I'll bring it up, I'm sure what I'm talking about in Ticonderoga, but it's quite nice.
And so just in general, for new trustees, if somebody emails us, typically, in the past, the president has responded back, right, George?
Yes.
Okay.
Usually.
And since I can't include everybody in that communication as this village business, I didn't, so, just so you know. And if we all email the same person, such is what it is. Any other comments, staff?
Nope.
Okay, it's the end of the reading file, and we are going to, we didn't need the executive session for 8A, but for 8B. Anyone wants to bear with me while I find the right language?
I can read it for you.
Please do.
Would that be okay?
Yep.
I will move that the trustees enter into executive session for the purpose of negotiating or securing of real estate purchase or lease options pursuant to 1 VSA 313A2 to include the unified manager, assistant manager, and community development director.
I'll second it.
Second?
Thank God. Any further comments on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thanks. You just want to go into the manager's